Farmers across the Canadian prairies have a long record of producing high-quality grains to help feed Canadians and millions of people in other parts of the world. While their production record has been exceptional, it hasn't always been easy. Grain farmers have always faced a range of problems, including drought, flooding, low prices, plant diseases, and insect infestations. Many of these can be controlled, while others cannot. Producers often feel that once they have the grain in the bin, their problems are over. All too often, this is not the case. The problem: stored grain insects. One of the biggest problems in dealing with these pests has been the difficulty in determining if insects do exist in stored grain. This monitoring has now become much easier with the development of a new, simple, and inexpensive grain insect trap. These traps can be placed in grain within any type of farm bin, ranging from older wooden structures to all sizes of steel bins. Here's how it works. The trap is pushed into the grain from the top of the pile, ideally in the center of the bin. By using a steel rod, it can be pushed as far as 3 meters into the grain. The trap should then be checked once a week. It's removed by pulling up on the nylon rope. Then the collecting chamber is unscrewed and the insects examined. Once the insects have been trapped, it's important to know what kind of insects you have to determine the nature of your problem and control required. Up to 60 different species of insects have been identified in Western Canadian grain bins at one time or another, but fortunately only a few are serious pests in Canada. Let's look at some of the biggest troublemakers. The most common pest in Western Canada is the rusty grain beetle. The adult is extremely flat, rectangular, and reddish-brown. It's 1.5 to 2.5 millimeters long and has V-shaped antennae. Eggs are laid outside the kernels, and white worm-like larvae enter the germ of previously damaged kernels, where they feed and develop into adults. Another common pest is the red flower beetle. The adults are 2.3 to 4.5 millimeters long, with an elongated body and reddish to blackish in color. Eggs are laid on the outside of the grain and hatch into worm-like larvae that feed on the outside shell of the kernel, thus damaging the germ and endosperm. These insects multiply very rapidly in warm grain and are usually most common in late fall or early winter when large populations build up. Hot spots often develop rapidly when insect populations are large, since they produce heat and moisture. Mold growth also occurs in these regions. Many types of fungus-feeding insects are present in stored grain and are often confused with grain-feeding insects. It's important to know the difference. Fungus-feeding pests don't damage the grain directly, but they do indicate the presence of tough or damp grain that is becoming moldy. Grain in this condition should be turned or dried, and this practice will also help to control the insects. Mites are also common pests in Canadian grain that's stored in a tough or damp condition. While more closely related to spiders than insects, the mites can reach large numbers, with some feeding directly on the kernels and others feeding on molds. The mites are tiny, with the adults measuring 0.3 to 0.6 millimeters in length. They have 8 legs as opposed to insects with 6 legs. Mites can multiply faster than insects and at a lower temperature. When you find mites in your grain, it normally indicates out-of-condition grain that should be turned or dried. Surveys show that in some years, insects can be found in up to 50% of bins containing cereals in Manitoba. Many of the insects detected are mold feeders, while some, such as the rusty grain beetle and the red flower beetle, are grain feeders. Again, remember that the early detection of insects in stored grain warns the farmer of potential problems. A few insects collected in traps may not reflect a problem, but large numbers indicate that insects are multiplying in hot spots in the grain. These hot spots often result in moldy areas that can spread, resulting in downgrading of the grain and a real loss for the producer. Probing and screening of stored grain has often been used to check for insect infestations. This is a less sensitive method of monitoring compared to the new traps. Probes collect only small samples in localized areas and usually are not sensitive enough to measure light and early infestations. Insects can also be found in livestock feeds, in any grain residue around the farm, and in carryover stocks. The insect threat can best be prevented by good housekeeping, with removal and destruction of all residues before a new crop is stored. The proper management of stored grain can help to maintain the quality of our products. This can mean savings to the farmer and helps maintain Canada's worldwide reputation in the grain industry.